And the last presentation for today will be the PKI and VPN. So in this case, we can use the PKI to manage for the certificate, for the digital certificate. In this case, we can use the certificate-based VPN authentication for IPSec. So that is the certificate-based IPSec VPN. So first of all, let's have a look at the Hillstone PKI trusted domain. So our PKI trust domain, including those functions, the key storage and also the management. So we can store those key pair into the firewall. And the second will be the certificate storage and management, which is the trust domain, as I mentioned before. For the VPN instance, we can create a trust domain to store the certificate. And then the CRL, receiving and refreshing, all the SCP protocol, which supported only in CLI. We do not support the function in the firewall to issue the user certificate. So those user certificate need to be generated by the CA. But the firewall can apply and generate the self-signed certificate, the local certificate. Here is the CA authentication process. So basically, the CA, as you can see here, the customer needs to apply for the CA certificates from the CA server, to get both of the root certificate and also client certificate. After the CA certificate issued from the CA server, we can import, as I mentioned, this root certificate to our Hillstone firewall. In this case, the original verification process will be switched from the CA server to the StoneOS, which is our firewall, from the CA server. So in this case, the firewall will help to do the certificate verification instead of the CA. Here is the way how to create the trust domain for the root certificate. As I mentioned, for the authentication method in the phase 1 negotiation, if you choose as pre-shared key, you need to manually add the password, the pre-shared key for both sides. And you also have the option to use the digital certificate for both ISA and DSA. So you can generate the ISA or DSA key through the PKI. And then after you generate the key pair for either ISA or DSA, so you can import the root CA certificate to firewall trust domain, combining with this generated key pair together with this generated key pair. And as I mentioned, the firewall cannot help to generate for the client certificate. So the device will act as the client side to apply the certificate to CA server. So in this case, after you import the root certificate in the firewall, so you can generate the requesting code to the CA server to enroll for your corresponding client certificate. So this is the client certificate application. And also, you can generate your own CA certificate and client certificate by using the open source tool, which is the XCA, the X certificate and key management. You can use this tool to generate to generate the certificate by yourself as a local CA, as a local CA. Let's have a look how to configure the certificate-based IPSec VPN. Here is the one example. So after you have this CA installed in the firewall, so the device can establish the VPN connection by using this third-party CA authentication, which is the third-party CA authentication. And we also support the self-signed certificate, So first of all, you can use the third-party CA certificate to authenticate for both firewall. Okay, in this case, you need to use the certificate that generated by the original CA, or your local CA. And we also support the self-signed certificate that we generated from the firewall directly. So both sides can generate their self-signed certificate and then share the certificate with each other, and they will install the certificate at their local database. In this case, they can authenticate for both sides for their self-signed certificate. Let's have a look how to create the self-signed certificate. From the firewall, so there is a trusted domain. You can use the self-signed certificate together with the key we just added into the system. There is the key pair we used to support for the certificate authentication, and then you can apply the certificate, the self-signed certificate. So both sides you can apply to generate the self-signed certificate, and then you can share the self-signed certificate from both firewall to another, and then you export the certificate, and then you import the certificate that shared by the other firewall, to your local trust domain, and that we can do the authentication based on the self-signed certificate. So this is the certificate-based IPSec VPN by using the self-signed certificate. And we can also debug to check for the certificate. So after you generated the certificate, the self-signed certificate, you also need to generate the ID. So through this, you are able to check both the issuer and the subject of the certificate. And also, when you install this self-signed certificate to the other firewall, you need to follow the format, which I'm going to show you after the presentation. We will do the demo, so you will see how to configure. As you can see, this is actually the ID that you need to add into each of the firewall, for the peer ID, for the authentication. And after the configuration of the VPN, you can use same show ISA and show as IPSec SA to check the status of the VPN connections that using this certificate-based IPSec.